Carlsen has made a habit of winning the last round of elite round tournaments, not because he needed to, but to put the boot in a little deeper. In this case, his last round victim was Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Now, Magnus already did this to MVL earlier this year at Granca, but Maxime did beat Magnus in the last round of the Norway Blitz, denying him first place there. So Magnus may have wanted a little more blood. And this time there was no shying away from theory, as Carlsen dismantled MVL's Grunfeld with shocking ease. All right, so Carlsen playing white. And as I hinted, it's a Grunfeld. Now, against Grunfeld players, Magnus would often play in sort of flank approaches or off lines, but now he's going into heavy-duty theory. He's now embraced this exchange variation, and he destroyed Grishuk with this last time out, and Vachier suffers an ugly fate as well. Okay, rook b1. Rook b1 sets up an idea of rook b5. So black usually plays a6, and then white plays the rook to c1. The idea is that white wants to force black to do something in the center. Once the c3 pawn is defended, then d5 becomes a threat. So black usually does it that way and then takes and starts trading things with the moves a6 and rook c1 in. That's the most popular way to play. Now, this approach, cd4, this is done as well, but usually black takes the queen, king takes, and then castles. Now, MVL decides not to place the white king in the center, and I guess the theory could be, well, the white king helps support the pawn's advance. But from this game we see, with the white king not being in the center, it seemed that those pawns were able to move pretty freely. Bishop g4, and perhaps this approach can really be questioned, as black is later on going to really miss the presence of this bishop on the light squares. So maybe Fianchetto development, something like b6 or e6 was indicated. Now, I think if g takes f3, e6, it's already a new position, which is a little bit hard to believe. But black never really is able to maintain enough pressure on the center. And the problem is, of course, he's got this offside knight on a5, and it can't move without the b7 pawn hanging. But when black plays b6, that creates these weaknesses on the light squares, and there's nothing to chase this bishop out. And black was just not able to rein in the white center pawns. First, white takes this c file. He's got that all to himself. And this little touch on the rook, so force black to weaken his pawn structure. h6, okay, to cover the g5 square. But now this advance comes in, and black doesn't really have enough pieces to take care of this. If e takes d4, white can force the rook off with bishop f4, and then the passed d pawn is going to roll. In fact, as these rooks get attacked, they really have very few squares to go to. So g5 covers the f4 square, but the bishop comes around this way, coming to b4. a6. So he tries to distract the bishop. If white takes this pawn, e takes d5. Now the rook has this square on c6, and while it remains a better position for white, this eases black's pain quite a bit. So Carlsen lets that pawn go, just keeps the bishop trained on c6. And now MVL is hoping for this line, e takes d5, rook e4. Now, it doesn't win anything because white is a3, but then knight c4 is possible, finally getting this bishop into the game, and black can hope to support it with b5, and it's not looking as quite so grim for black. But Carlsen plays rook takes d5, and it looks pretty ugly. Black probably needs to avoid the exchange, something like rook b8. Okay, it looks pretty ugly, but at least white has to make a decision here. He can play bishop d6. He could try to put a rook on the 7th. He can go for this bishop's opposite colors ending, rook c4. He's probably going to be a pawn up, or at least he's actually kind of functionally a pawn up now. But okay, black has drawing chances and is well, clearly going to be tortured quite a lot. But it would be interesting to see how Carlsen would have played. But it just flows pretty smoothly after this exchange. And the problem is that in this case, with the white rook penetrating, there's just too many tactics now for white. And the move knight c4 runs into problems. After knight c4, white can hit this rook, and the rook has no good place to go. If rook d4, that runs into this tactic, check. Well, there's bishop c2, maybe. Okay, let's say we go king g8 to avoid that. But then there's rook g7 and bishop c3. The two bishops. So the other line is knight f4, knight c4, f3. All right, let's say black now tries rook f4. Now we get, well, almost a mating attack. King e5, so black escapes the mate, but now the d-pawn rolls in. Yeah, so lots of problems, a passed pawn and two bishops. It's not fun. So MVL tried bishop e5. The white pieces are just pretty dominant here. The d-pawn is rolling. It gets all the way to the 7th rank. Okay, white is ready to queen this and win a piece, but maybe he'll manage to do even better than that. Okay, so the rook is coming to attack the knight. If bishop h2, king h2, so white is going to win the knight, but it gets worse because white's next move isn't actually going to be d8 queen, but rook to b8 attacking the knight. And then the knight's going to fall and the pawn's still going to be there. So he tried bishop d4 and resigned after rook c7 as if he takes, rook takes knight. And, well, white's next move, he can make a queen. Black can't do anything about it. That was a surprisingly easy win for white. MVL is a big Grunfeld specialist, although it has to be said that the plan he adopted looks kind of suspicious. A lot of little things went wrong, and he never really looked like he had a chance. Quite a domination for such a player to experience. But that's what we've been seeing from Carlsen lately. And in amassing 8 out of 11, Carlsen did a little bit of everything in this tournament. He won 3 games in a row. First of all, he won 3 games in the tournament with black. One was a long grinding endgame against Ding, but he also defeated Nepom and Giri with lightning attacks. I decided to go back to the beginning of the tournament to show how Carlsen reduced Giri to helplessness in amazingly short order. Okay, so here Giri is white. And he tries bishop b5. You know, we saw plenty of this in the World Championship match. But Carlsen plays e6. This is a, you know, totally different approach. Bishop takes knight. Okay, that's one of the ways white can go with this. So black wants to play knight g6. Maybe he'll play e5, and then, you know, double pawns won't necessarily be such a problem. So white likes to try to restrict this strategy, often to play e5 to try to mess up the pawns. But sometimes he likes to inhibit black from playing f6. So this h4, this is a move in the position. But judging by how well this worked out in the Sveshnikov against Carlsen, maybe people should stop fleeing their h pawn. It seems to they seem to end up getting mated when they lose that pawn. So Carlsen blocks it. So here's e5. Black can still play f6, but of course his king side's more weakened. But Carlsen just totally switches strategy. He says, okay, I'll accept these ugly double isolated c pawns, but otherwise, you know, my position is fine. I've got kind of a working majority on the king side. You know, later I can play e5, got the bishop pair, and it's not so easy to get at those pawns. Well, Giri played this pretty strangely, knight fd2. I guess he just saw that his knights would come to the best possible squares, or he felt that the queen coming to f3 was going to cause specific problems for black, but he really misjudged this position. And by taking his knight away from the king side, well, we can kind of guess that h4 pawn is going to drop, and it's going to be a very significant development. So Aguirre should have just brought his pieces out normally. Hindsight, of course, is 2020, but I think I would be afraid to play such development against Magnus. Now, I like how Carlsen deals with this. He just brings the bishop out and clips this knight on a6. Because the bishop on the light squared bishop, unless black is playing e5, that bishop has nothing to do. So he just trades it for a useful knight, and he's going to play with the other pieces. Meanwhile, this weakness on h4, well, the former weakness on h4, now it's just gone. Before the queen came out, white had the possibility of playing g3 and recapturing the h-pawn. But it's going to be a very, very big deal that this pawn is missing. Now, white could have at least delayed castling, possibly tried to castle queenside, maybe something like bishop d2. But this was definitely asking for it. Now black has a 4-on-2 majority on the king side, and he's just going to throw them forward in attack. But first, he consolidates his position. And maybe Anish didn't realize how easy that was going to be. Knight e2 prevents knight d4, but it's pretty passive. And now this nice little maneuver with the rook coming to the center. And that buys black enough time to get this rolling. Now he could have tried something like bishop e5, f6, rook d1. The idea that black takes the bishop, rook takes a7 is going to get some play for white. But actually black can just move the pawn. And, well, he's going to basically be able to win in a similar fashion to the game. Plus he's got the queen jumping into e4. So as we saw rook d1, gets the d file, but the queen just goes to a8. And look at this, h4. He's going h3. It's unstoppable. Queen, knight, and rook pointing at the king. Nothing defending. White pieces all offside. f3, h3. And after 23 moves, Giri resigns. He hasn't even lost so much as a pawn. But he gives up because there isn't even any kind of sensible plan to try to avoid checkmate. HG2 coming, knight h4, the queen is going to be jumping in. There really isn't anything to even suggest here. he's just so totally mated. Really quite incredible how that happened so quickly. Obviously, Giri did not play this game well at all, but Magnus is really showing us how incredibly dangerous he can be these days, and he is creeping closer to 2,900. I don't know if he'll ever get there. It becomes harder and harder because he's more and more above everybody. He needs to score more points to gain rating points, but it is remarkable how unstoppable he has been since his world championship, his narrow world championship defense, and he's looking like nobody can touch him now.